So you need to locate files based on their name, size, or permissions. Stick around to find out how.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to more of the LPIC One Linux Administrator. We're going to be talking about locating files with Find. However, Don, what are some of the key goals for this episode?
All right, my main goal is to help you guys understand the Find utility. We're going to learn a little bit about how it works, how we can search across our hard drive to find a file based on its file name, which is probably the most common use for the Find utility. But we're also going to spice it up a little bit with searching by things like file size, file permissions, and various other kind of gimmicky add-ons we can do to Find to make it work a little more effectively.
All right, Don. In this episode, I have a feeling I'm going to see how many times I can say the word find. But when we talk about it, we're going to find out. That's right. What is your go-to method if you're going to be looking for files?
All right. Well, remember, Wes, I described Find in another episode as being like a cudgel or a bat. You know, it's like hammering a nail with a baseball bat. This is usually my go-to command when I've exhausted all of my other options. So which, where is, type, locate, all those other crazy commands. I need to search the whole hard drive to find a file. I have my Dracula.txt file. It's somewhere on the hard drive. I don't remember where. You know what? Just search the whole thing and find it for me, okay? And so the way I do that is I'll drop to a terminal like mine here, and I will just type find. And then with find, it's a little bit weird, the syntax, because you have to tell it the path to search first, and then what you're searching for. So the path I'm going to search is /. Search from the root of the hard drive. I'm going to search the whole hard drive to try and find this file, and then I'm going to look for -name. And I'll look for Dracula.txt. Now, Wes and I were talking a little bit before the show. The find command is a little weird because it breaks a few Unix standards. So what we're used to seeing is a single dash would usually be followed by a single letter. So -name in this case would be interpreted as -n, -a, -m, -e. In the BSD world, if you use a name, you would say --name. But here it's a single dash followed by a name. So find doesn't follow the normal Linux and Unix syntax. So you need to remember that on the exam because it's easy to see a question with an answer that has --name, and that makes a lot more sense, but that's not right. It is just -name. So when I run this, it's going to search the whole hard drive looking for files anywhere named Dracula.txt. And it is case sensitive, so I did a capital D on this one, and it's going to search and run. All right, so it went pretty quick. My hard drive doesn't have a lot on it. The larger your hard drive is, the longer it takes to search. And I got some output. Now, there's a lot of stuff that as a regular user, I don't have permission to on the hard drive, so I did get some permission denied. But if I just scroll back somewhere in here, I should be able to find Dracula.txt. And I say should. Wait, was that it? No, that's the beginning. Somewhere in here, I promise you, Dracula.txt is in these errors.
You know, Don, one of the things I was wondering, didn't we learn how to maybe kind of suppress some of those errors? Because that didn't look like it helped you too much.
All right, so let's travel back in our mind. Well, if I had limited the path, right? If I had limited it to just searching like my home directory, so if I said find /, I'm going to have permission to everything in my home directory, and so it's going to go in and I find it right there, right? So restricting the path helps. But if I literally don't know where this file is, I can't restrict the path. I need to search all the way up top of the root, and I'm going to get a ton of errors. So think back to our episode on redirection, and remember that we learned a command where we could redirect errors, and this is a great spot to do it. I don't care about those files or those folders that I have permission denied on, because if the Dracula file is in there, I'm not allowed in there anyway. I can't get it, right? I mean, I guess I could sudo this or whatever, but not a great idea. So instead, what I'm going to do is leverage error redirection and do a > sign so that I can redirect the errors to /dev/null. Just throw away the errors and just give me the good stuff. And so now I can run it. It searches the whole hard drive, and I find every instance of Dracula.txt.
So, Don, is there any way we can search by, other characteristics of your files?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff we can search by. I just did file name. That's usually what I'm hunting around for. We could search for things like a file extension. Maybe I want to find all the PDFs on my hard drive. So I could use a wildcard for that. If I hit my up arrow here and bring this back up, instead of searching for Dracula.txt, I could change that and search for star.pdf, like that. And there is actually I think it's a -E option with find that lets you use a regular expression so you can go crazy. But simple wildcards are usually enough. When I run that, there it goes through. It's locating all these different PDFs that I have. I kind of wonder what that secret PDF is. I didn't make that. Top secret, confidential. Oh, those are printer cover pages that are part of the print system cups. So anyhow, we find PDFs. You learn about all sorts of things on your system. I've got a Russian form. So we use these with find command. Well, you can also search by things like file size. And this is a really useful one for me. Like if I'm worried about my hard drive, if I pull up a df.h and I see that my root, I'm at 19% utilization right now, which is not bad, but maybe I'm at 80%. And I'm thinking, man, I'm starting to run out of hard drive space. What is eating up all of my hard drive space? Well, we can use the find command to find large files. It doesn't help with finding large quantities of small files, which is usually what fills up your hard drive in Linux, like a log file going crazy somewhere. But if I want to look for large files, I could come in and I could say find, and then tell it where to look. Maybe I'll look across the whole hard drive again. And this time I'm going to tell it a dash size and then specify a size. Now with the size, I can specify an exact number. Like I want files that are exactly 20 bytes, which a C represents a byte. Or I could do 20 kilobytes, a K. Or I have to go capital for this, but a 20M, 20 megabytes. Or even 20 gigabytes with a capital G. These are exact sizes. Normally we want greater than or less than. If I want files less than 20 gigs, I would say minus 20G, or files greater than 20 gigs, I would say plus 20G, right? Let's look on my hard drive. I want to find files that are over 100 megabytes. So I'll do a plus 100M. It's going to search the whole drive. I am going to get errors back, so let me do that error redirection again to /dev/null to clean it up. And now it's going to search my hard drive for any files I have over 100 megabytes. And looking at it here, most of this is important stuff. I've got my GNOME snaps. I don't want to get rid of that because it's going to break my GUI. Although I do see where I've got an older version of GNOME that I could probably get rid of because I'm running a newer version now. So it's kept a previous copy. But I also see I've got some CentOS ISOs laying around that are probably pretty big that I could get rid of. So a great way to go in and find what's consuming all of your hard drive space using a command that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but it's pretty powerful for that.
So we've seen searching by, the file extension. You showed us, searching for file size and a couple attributes of that. Are there other characteristics, Don, that we can look for?
There are. I think we've seen the major use cases at this point, but there's a few fringe things that we can use it for. I know I've talked with a few security professionals over the years that use Find as part of their audit system, that they'll audit for files that have crazy permissions, right? Like they want to find files where everyone has write and execute permissions to it. Right? Because then in theory, if an attacker gets in, they can put whatever they want in that file and then execute it or trick other people into executing it. So they'll go and do searches based on file permissions. If you want to search based on file permissions, what you do is you say find, and I'm going to limit this one to my directory. So I'll just do /. So it's going to search my home. I could just do /, I guess. So I'm going to find files in my directory, and then I would just say -perm. So I'm looking for permissions. And then I would tell it the permissions that I was looking for, okay? And when you look for permissions, what you have to do is you have to do a /, which is a little bit weird. And then you can say user permissions equal or group permissions equal or other permissions equal. And you can use commas to separate. So maybe I want to look for where the group has write permissions and other people have write permissions. So show me every file where somebody other than me, the owner, has permissions, okay? So when I run that, it's going to look across and show me those files that have that permission, right? And so I can use this to scan for all sorts of things. If I'm trying to find things that have permissions that are too loose, you can use plus or minus on this one also, where R is considered the least permissions, and then write, and then execute. So if I said plus W, that would include write and execute. A little bit weird way to search. Usually I do equals because I'm looking for something very, very specific with this. And you can search across the entire hard drive. You can also look for things like who the owner is. If I want to find every file that belongs to me, right? So if I'm logged in as, if I do a who am I, I'm logged in as dpossett, right? And if I do an ID dpossett, I can see that I happen to be user ID 1000 and group ID 1000, right? So I could do a find, and I could search the, maybe I want to search the /share folder. Okay, so I'm going to look in the /share folder, and I want to find anything in there that's owned by group dpossett, right? So I could do it that way. I could also do if it was user dpossett. All right, that's another way. If we're dealing with multiple servers, you probably don't want to use names. You probably want to use the ID numbers. So you would use -GID for group ID or -UID for user ID. And I could look for user ID 1000, show me everything that's in there. I don't have a share folder. Should have looked for that ahead of time. So I'd probably use /USR/share. There we go. So I look for anything that I happen to own in /USR/share, or maybe I'm looking in /opt, who's installed optional software on my system, or have I installed anything optional, and I can look and find what I own and what belongs to me. So really good for permissions-based auditing. Maybe you're about to delete somebody's account, so you want to search the hard drive for anything they own so you can change the ownership to somebody else before you delete their account. This is a great way to do it.
I see that it's cluttering up your terminal there. Fine, will really go into town here. Is there a way that you could maybe limit some of those directories?
Yeah, the more stuff you search, the messier it gets. And I mentioned how I could limit it down to a particular directory. One of the problems with Find, I shouldn't say problems, one of the great, phenomenal things about Find is that it's recursive. It searches all the subdirectories, and that's what makes such a mess when we do some of these searches, right? So we've got all those permission denieds and so on. I get this especially when I'm looking in etc. So I want to look inside of /etc, and I want to find stuff related to SSH. So I might say find /etc -name SSH, right? So it'll show me the SSH stuff. And when I run that, I get some permission denied. So let's sudo this. I'm going to sudo this time because I am looking for stuff that I would configure as an administrator. And I can see I've got /etc/SSH, /etc/default/SSH, /etc/init.d/SSH, right? What if I just wanted to find things called SSH that were right inside of /etc? I don't want to search the subdirectories. Well, it's recursive by default, so it's going to do that. But what we can do is we can override that by adding a little more to our command. What you can do is you can add -max depth and specify a depth of directories that you want to search. So I can say just go one folder deep, right? And when I run that, now I just see /etc/SSH because it didn't search inside of /etc/default or /etc/init.d. Now, be careful with this because of the way that's calculated. If I do a max depth of 0, it actually doesn't perform the search because it went into 0 directories, right? So really 1 is kind of the lowest max depth that you would use. But then from there, you could start to increase that to go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper based on what it is that you want. And I guess in my cases, I've already hit rock bottom, and so it's not going to find any more. But you might have a max depth of 6 or 7 or whatever, depending on how far you wanted to go. But setting a max depth of 1 is a great way to say, I don't want to search in the subdirectories, just hit this one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, finding files based on certain attributes. Now, we've got a great demonstration of a lot of the different ways you would use this. Don, what are some of the major or the key takeaways for our viewers?
All right, our key takeaways here is that Find is a great tool for, oddly enough, finding stuff, right? We can find files based on their name, their size, their permissions, and we can locate things anywhere on the hard drive. We don't have to install a bunch of special stuff. We don't need a crazy database like the locate command. We're not dependent on the path, like where is and which, that we're able to search across everything. But we also learned that there's a couple of tags that we want to use with it, things like redirecting errors, limiting our max depth to make the find command as useful as possible. And that's all what we saw in this episode.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's all for this episode, but we got a lot more exciting content coming up in the LPIC 1 Linux Administrator, so stay tuned.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.